Good morning. It's another nice morning. It's a very dark morning here in Gothenburg, and I'm on my way to the gym as per usual. So let's get into the rant of today. So today I'm going to talk to you about offline first. And if you haven't heard what offline first is about, it's the emerging trendy concept pushed mostly by our friends at Google. And just the other day I watched a micro tip from Surma, which is one of my favorite presenters of all time. Paul Lewis coming in as a strong first, and Jake Archibald, hope I'm saying that right, is on that list as well. So what was he basically was saying, giving us a little bit of a tip about how to use service workers and the cache for service workers to do a little bit of, some tips about caching. And in that video he talked about, he basically used something along the lines of the phrase virtually along the lines of, hey, that offline first and like the progressive web app trend is becoming more and more of a standard, and therefore these tips are yada 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 yada. But basically I kind of hooked into that it's becoming a standard. Now, don't kill me Google, but I honestly believe that maybe, at least from my perspective, this idea that offline first is becoming an expected feature from the users of the world is not correct. It's not accurate. Maybe you have data that proves otherwise, but I'm pretty sure that most of us are still in the mindset that, at least I am, and I've never talked to anyone who isn't, where, if I ask them, if you're using your phone and you are, online, you're visiting Facebook or something like that, do you have, what do you kind of like do if there is, an outage? Like, what if your network goes down? Most people will tell me that, I'll just wait until I get onto a Wi-Fi network again, or if they're out and about, they go through a tunnel or something like that. They usually just, the answer is quite commonly, I'm just gonna wait until the network comes back. I've never talked to anyone who actually expects the application to be usable when you're offline. If it's if it's a network-based application, if it's a web page. Never ever. I've never talked to anyone who says something like that. Not the user anyway. And just the other day, I was speaking to one of my colleagues. We were implementing at work a feature for basically a help center. And the thing is that we were in stand-up, and he said that, I want to take some extra time to implement a fallback system, or virtually like a caching system, for when the user goes offline. And I asked him, okay, what's the use case for that? And he kind of looked at me like I was weird or something, and he said, well, if the user goes into an offline mode, it would be very nice if, they could still remain in the chat and use the articles and stuff. And I said, absolutely. I'm not questioning that whatsoever, but why do you want to make it? What do you have that proves that this is valuable? Well, but what if the user, and I could hear, it sounded to me like I know so well what's happened, because I used to talk like that as well, and that, that's a whole different talk about me swallowing basically everything Google said about Angular and microservices. And it's not just the Google, of course, but I could hear, so bear with me. And then he said, well, what happens if the user goes through a tunnel? Then don't you want them to have a nice experience? And I said, yeah, I would like that. I would like that very much. But if you consider that this is, I would argue, an extreme edge case. Our application is a Swedish application. It is designed for people from Sweden, where we have one of the best network supports in the world. And what you're talking to me about is to spend time implementing, supporting, and testing, and doing some proper work to support something that will be valuable for a fraction of people. For what does it take? How long does it take to go through a tunnel? A few seconds, maybe, at best. And it's not even about doing it for the whole application, it's about doing it for the help center. So what your use case is that if a user is chatting with one of our support members while they're out with their phone and they go through a tunnel, then you want to add logic and put hours and hours, maybe days of work into making sure that they can still access the articles, not the chat, but the articles that are in the help center. Just listen to yourself. That is like, if you put that much thought into a good user experience, then hey, maybe I'm going to put this out there, maybe you should start caring more about accessibility, for example. How about that? How about caring about semantic markup or ARIA labels, and put effort into the people who have a disability? Because I'm pretty sure that, and this is for those of you who haven't been programming for all that long, this is a dirty secret, and people, even Paul Lewis and Surma and the Supercharged, if you don't know about them, go and watch Supercharged. It's one of my absolute favorite, if not my favorite show on YouTube or podcast, basically. And even these people who are senior beyond senior, like the poster children of web standards and all that stuff, aren't experts in accessibility issues. Like, they have, Google releases videos about accessibility, but the dirty little secret of the web is that nobody really cares about accessibility at large scale. Very few, very, very few. If you have an accessibility oriented site, it's either because you're investing in it or you just happen to have developers who they have to actually try to make it accessible. It's very, very poorly supported. Accessibility is extremely ignored, broadly ignored for the most part on the web. And it shouldn't be that way, but that's the way it is. And the reason is very simple. The amount of people that can benefit from ARIA labels and who need screen readers and so forth are a minority. A very, very, very small amount of people are actually getting benefits from this, and most of the businesses who make websites will almost always value delivery speed because it takes more time to make something accessible. Like, they will favor catering to the common user, like their large focus group, the target audience of what they're making or they're selling, rather than catering to these extreme corner cases. And that's a harsh word, it's not an extreme corner case. I'm in no way trying to say that it shouldn't be better, but this is the way it works. I'm very sorry to say, because I honestly believe, and I do actually put a lot of effort into learning things like capturing modals and ARIA and all these standards, so that if I need to be able to do this, I can actually make things accessible. But on to what I was saying. So I was telling my colleague that I know for a fact that you don't care about that. You don't put any effort into it. But I'm pretty sure that the amount of users, considering that the company has actually won an accessibility award and gotten money for it, you don't put any effort into that. But you're putting effort into this offline first thing. And he's kind of like, I couldn't sell him on the idea, because he was convinced that offline first would bring value to the company. And I keep coming back to this. Yes, it will bring value, but not as much as you have been sold to believe. And if I'm going to stick my neck out, I honestly believe that the reason, because I really only see Google pushing service workers and offline first and progressive web apps. There are others who are doing it, but not as much as Google. And I think that has more to do with a political discussion rather than there's a crying urgency for offline first. And what I mean by that is that Google has a vested interest in providing native experiences through web applications. The backbone of Google's infrastructure and like their business is on the web. So it's not surprising that Google puts a lot of effort and time into trying to provide a platform for web developers that is rivaling and hopefully better than the native stuff, so that we will keep on making web applications. And service workers is just another means to do that. It's a great technology. I love service workers, but it's not as adopted, or rather I haven't seen any proof that it is as like sought after as Google may want you to believe. So don't think that just because somebody on YouTube or so forth is telling you that service workers and offline first and all that stuff is super important, because frankly, it's not. It's really not. At least not in the way that it's being sold to you. Because honestly, ask yourself, how many people, or ask anybody, how many people would expect a web application to keep on working when there's no network? I would say very few. Maybe in a little while this trend will become something more, but right now I think that you have to take it with a little bit of pinch of salt.